Welcome to the Triple Option Week 8 reaction show. I'm Mikey Britt alongside Blake Thomason.
I'm the diehard dog fan, but my loyalty is currently suspended indefinitely.
I
Uh,
got Alex Humble.
yeah, I'm a Knoll through and through, and rumor has it that Jameis Winston paid the refs in crab legs this weekend.
Hey, and let's not forget the last time the Washington Huskies beat the Oregon Ducks. Nate Robinson was the cornerback there. All right, fellas. You want to start out with the Florida State Notre Dame, Alex?
Oh yeah, I love to. Florida State, Notre Dame in the prime time, lights is on, Saturday night, college football, two historic programs, and it kind of started out slow. I was expecting Florida State to kind of come out hot out of the gate. They hadn't impressed really, and even Notre Dame, they struggled last week, and I was expecting some fireworks early. First quarter was kind of slow. Both the offenses were kind of feeling their way through the game. Traded 3 and outs to start the game, and Florida State got that big stop on fourth down. And then it kind of seemed like Notre Dame started to have their way. They were able to run the ball, and something that Brian Kelly did so great in the whole game, I kind of marveled at the play calling. They were just able to stay ahead of the sticks. There's a big stat for the game was Notre Dame was 1 for 8 on 3rd and 5 and longer, and they were 7 for 10 on 3rd and 4 or less. So when they stayed ahead of the sticks, they were able to keep the drives going, and that's what kind of led to their success throughout the game. And I thought Florida State really didn't impress me at all in the first half. Jameis Winston had that egregious interception. I actually tweeted, it looks like Jameis Winston's playing 500 out there. He just threw the ball up. But they came out in the second half, and they really had something to prove right off the bat, that 80-yard touchdown drive. And I had called it in the predictions. Travis Rudolph, he was going to be a key to that Florida State offense. And he kind of reminded me of another young receiver from South Florida in his freshman year playing against Notre Dame in a big game. Rashad Green, actually, in 2011. He tore up Notre Dame in the Champ Sports Bowl. Well, I couldn't say tore up because the offense was terrible in that game, but he played a great game. And Travis Rudolph did the same thing. And Rashad Green, he was right there, consistent as always tonight. I got some stats for you. James Winston with 8 for 15 in the first half, 15 for 16 in the second half. That's why I almost ripped my hair out in their last drive when Jimbo Fisher decided to run the ball 3 times, milk the clock down to 3 minutes left, and then punt it with a subpar punter who actually played a very decent game, averaged 41 yards net on each punt. But they basically gave the ball to Notre Dame on the 50-yard line and said, "Here, you're either going to score and beat us, or we're going to stop you." And it was risky business for Jimbo Fisher and Florida State. And I mean, you can't not mention the call at the end of the game. You go back and look at it, and I think it has to be the right call. Both receivers, it gave Florida State a big break, because if you watch the play, you have Darby, P.J. Williams, and Jalen Ramsey all lined up on that side. And after the play, Jalen Ramsey is yelling at Ronald Darby, "Why didn't you cover Corey Robinson? What's going on?" There was miscommunication before the play with the Florida State corners, but the Notre Dame receivers bailed them out by just a stupid play. They were both obviously blocking. They made no intent to run routes. It wasn't a pick play. They were just blocking past the line of scrimmage. Robinson was past the line of scrimmage. The penalty was the right call, and Florida State got lucky.
Yeah, just something quick about that call. As both a receiver and a defensive back, that was definitely the right call right away when I watched the play live. I definitely thought that there was no way it was a clean play. Uh, the receivers, when you run pick plays like that, if you're not going to run a real route, you're taught to just get up to the defender and then just kind of like post up, turn, and stick your butt into him. And
hmm
it obviously just went up there with their hands up like they were form blocking. I do think that it probably was blown coverage given the frustration between the defenders after the play. And even if Notre Dame didn't actually run the set like pick, if they just ran 2 drag routes, it would have been wide open anyways. Definitely lucky, but in college football, sometimes you just got to be lucky.
Oh yeah, and then I had a few other stats I wanted to throw down with you guys. Jameis Winston on first down was 14 for 16 throwing the ball for 185 yards. It's over 11 yards per attempt. He was dynamite on first down. Florida State ran it 13 times. Jimbo Fisher likes to stay balanced. Probably should have just kind of foregone the run. Jameis was hot. Just tried to pass more. They were moving the ball a lot better when they threw it. Everett Golson, on the other hand, 12 for 23 on first down throwing the ball, under 6 yards per attempt. Brian Kelly did a good job of staying staying ahead of the sticks, but there was a couple times where I thought that Notre Dame really had an advantage. Niall Lawrence Stample, Florida State's starting defensive tackle, was lost for the year a couple weeks ago, and Justin Mitchell had just got back from injury, and they were rotating in some young players at the defensive tackle. And Notre Dame's offensive line was really able to get some push, and they were running the ball really well. And I would have liked to see a little more running out of Brian Kelly, and I think they would have won the game if they would have stuck to that, because they had some drives where it looked like they just stuck to the pass when the run was there more. And then last stat for you, James Winston was 10 for 12 against the blitz with 2 touchdowns. They called him a magician against the blitz last year. He had struggled a little bit this year, and Notre Dame committed to blitzing him. James Winston has 26 touchdown passes the last 2 years against the blitz. That's the most of any quarterback in the Power 5 college football conferences.
Oh, it's pretty impressive. Mikey, do you want to give us a breakdown of the Oregon-Washington?
Hey now, the Ducks. They went out and they did what they needed to do. Washington's an inferior opponent, and Oregon's beat them 11 times in a row by 17 or more points. That's a pretty phenomenal stat. 17 or more points, 11 straight years. This Husky team, I mean, it seems like just within my lifetime we've totally switched roles, and it's good to see. Yep, the Ducks won 45-20. And the MVP of the game had to be Royce Freeman. He had 169 yards, 4 touchdowns. A nice for the first touchdown of the game. He actually had a nice 37-yard touchdown, and he looked like LaMichael James with bigger tree trunks for legs, though. Marcus did no wrong. He looked good today. Royce Freeman got most of the touchdowns, but Marcus created a lot of that. He went 24 for 33, 2 touchdowns. Kept his perfect interception ratio going strong with 0 interceptions, and that's 0 interceptions on the year. Yeah, so I think he's steady in there at the number 2 spot in the Heisman race as of now, especially with Petty and a couple guys losing here. Just right behind Dak Prescott. One of the breakout players of the game had to be tight end Pharaoh Brown. He's been up and coming. He's filled in really nicely. Last year he filled in for Colt Iola as he was having problems in school and just tons of extracurricular activities. And I mean, I hope he's doing better now that he's in the NFL. Hopefully he finds a job. Hopefully he settles down. It's good to see Pharaoh out there doing things like a Pharaoh, man.
Yeah, I thought Pharaoh really snowballed that Washington defense.
That's a reference to a off-field incident when Oregon may have gotten a little bit of trouble throwing some snowballs.
Yeah, man, but Pharaoh, the tight end, but I think our no-name, for the most part, receiving core is really getting the job done without Braylon. We saw a really nice catch by Dwayne Stanford. That was a pretty sick grab. Used to seeing Oregon wide receivers catching the ball and running it in the end zone. It was nice to see a nice acrobatic catch at the back of the end zone. And a great ball from Marcus as well. Something to note, an early injury early on was Thomas Tyner. Oregon's, one of Oregon's running backs. You could say he's first or second string. He's a really solid player, solid asset, quick guy. And he was injured on the kick return. I believe it was the second kick return of the game. Shaq Thompson made a phenomenal hit on him. It was one of those weird times where you see like a normal tackle, and I think he broke his arm. I'm not sure. Oregon's not releasing information on the injury. They never do. It's kind of unfortunate, kind of smart by their part. But yeah, it was weird to see an injury on a hit where no one got their legs pinned under them or got their arm bent back. It was just It was just a normal tackle. Fell back. Shaq kind of lit him up on that, coming out of nowhere on the kick coverage. But anyway, the Ducks will be down at California, Cal Berkeley, on Friday night at 7 o'clock. This is their game before Stanford, so no looking ahead. But yeah, they'll be looking to shine at Levi Stadium, primetime Friday night. And yeah, should be a great game.
Yeah, and I got a couple of numbers for the Oregon game for you. Royce Freeman, he doesn't remind me of LaMichael James so much in their style of play, but every Oregon fan's thinking LaMichael just because you haven't seen a true freshman, dominate like in the sense that Royce is, and it makes you think of LaMichael.
Puts the
Well, so I went
defense.
back and I looked at LaMichael's game log. Royce Freeman already has 11 touchdowns this year. It took LaMichael 12 games his freshman year to rush for 11 touchdowns, and Royce Freeman's run for 200 or for he's got two straight 100-yard games for the first time in his career. After LaMichael James did that, he never had a game where he rushed for under 80 yards the rest of his freshman season. So look for Royce Freeman to just keep it going. And then Marcus Mariota, his interception streak, or should I say lack thereof, 353 pass attempts his streak last year was the record in the Pac-12. He's currently at 238. That's second all time in the Pac-12, only behind his own record that, barring a fluke play, would maybe still be going today.
Wow.
Yeah, that's some pretty impressive stuff, especially the high-powered offense to just keep control of the ball like that. So the last game that we'll be discussing of our personal teams is
Yeah, how about them dogs?
Georgia, Arkansas. They've burned me twice. My last couple of picks, I took Arkansas, but I got to give credit to Georgia. It started off, Arkansas kind of just marched right down the field and scored. They got into the end zone, and it kind of looked like this was going to be a long day for the Dogs. Looked like the old defense was going to show up, give up a ton of yards, but probably an underrated play. Ray Drew on that point after blocked it, and it was 6-0, and it kind of just felt like it was so early, but it still felt like the wind just kind of left the sails. And right after that, Georgia came out, and they actually threw the ball. They attacked the Hogs through the air, and they were able to find success, and they scored. They went up 7-6, and right after they scored the touchdown, they went for an onside kick. They didn't recover, but I like the idea. I like Mark Richt coming out being aggressive, not trying to play timid and just hope for the best. They were coming out to win. And they were able to stop them. They got a couple sacks, and they were able to score a field goal, 10-6. And right after that point, it was just all downhill from there. They were able to just pound the ball on the ground, pass it through the air, and they were able to get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They forced 4 turnovers in this game. They went up 24-6. They got a turnover. They were able to score, go up 31-6. And so Arkansas was thinking, right before halftime, we need to put some points on the board so we can stay in this. And Georgia was able to get a 4th down sack strip and return it all the way for a touchdown. So backfired on Arkansas. We were up 38-6. And I was just surprised, again, these last 2 games on the road, they went up 72-6. It was crazy. The second half, they definitely let up. Classic Mark Richt stepping off the gas. Arkansas was able to sort of get back in it, but the lead that they built was too big. A nice touchdown pass by Hudson Mason to Chris Conley pretty much sealed the game. Nick Chubb, another outstanding performance. It looked even better than the last time. I know last time he had a lot of yards, but only 3.8 yards per carry. This time he had over 200 yards rushing on 30 carries. It's been really fun to watch, and it's nice to see another freshman have success. Kind of reminds you of another freshman running back in recent years that
Isaiah Crowell.
But all around good game. The defense has kind of been a soft spot, at least in the last couple of years. I think Jeremy Pruitt might be coming into something here. I don't know if it's Todd Gurley's suspensions kind of lit a fire under this team, but over the past couple of weeks, Georgia's actually moved themselves into number 1 in the nation in turnover margin. It's a pretty incredible thing considering last year they were one of the worst teams in the nation. And the thing is, they don't just generate a lot of turnovers. They're actually controlling the ball. They only have 4 turnovers on the season. And the scary thing is they're only getting healthier. They pretty much have an easy route for the rest of the schedule. The only thing they have is a game against Auburn, but that is at home. I think Georgia is very much alive in the playoff standings.
Yeah. Just need to do their job in the East, and I think it's theirs for the taking. South Carolina not looking good at all. That Texas A&M loss is looking worse every week. Yeah,
Yeah,
congrats.
one thing about Nick Chubb, it's crazy. In the last 2 weeks, he has 68 carries. Todd Gurley in the first 5 games that he played, he had 94 carries. And you would think the feature back, Todd Gurley would have a lot more touches. Yeah, Nick Chubb's already. I mean, at this rate, he'll surpass Todd Gurley's carries by this next game, which is crazy. Just shows the kind of workhorse he is. I mean, he doesn't have the yards per attempt that Gurley has, but he's able to just play after play, just attack the defense.
Yeah, the really incredible thing to me is that when Todd Gurley was a freshman, he was being held and he was splitting carries with Keith Marshall, and they kind of had the dynamic duo at running back where Nick Chubb has really just been the horse. He's carried the ball 30 plus. He's got 30 plus touches. It's definitely surprising, and it's definitely a pleasant surprise to see him just be able to come in and just work, especially with so many injuries happening to running backs over the last 5 years. Just seeing someone that can come in and just take hit after hit and keep getting up. So now we're going to talk about the biggest games over the weekend. As Alex pretty much predicted, it was the Wild Wild West. We had a lot of upsets in the Big 12. We'll start with probably the most surprising, at least to everyone outside of Alex Humble's house, the Baylor-West Virginia game. His former Florida State boy, Clint Trickett, outdueled Bryce Petty. I thought that it was a pretty close game, at least for the first half. I think the turning point of the game, though, was right before halftime. West Virginia was able to score 10 points in the last 4.5 minutes, and they were able to take the lead going into the half. I thought that was big because after that point, Baylor only scored one more time, and then it was just all West Virginia from there. Looking at some of the stats, Bryce Petty not only got outdueled, he actually looked pretty poor. He was under 50% passing. He threw for 223 yards, which is subpar for his standards. I didn't get the game prediction right. However, I was correct on saying that Kevin White was going to be a player to watch. He had 8 catches, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Definitely impressive performance. And it kind of made me at least change my mind on West Virginia. When Alabama played West Virginia, sort of like, oh, this is not really a tough opening matchup. But now when you see what West Virginia has been able to do, sort of, a 10-point loss to Alabama and then this win over Baylor, they look pretty impressive. I wouldn't say playoff contender, but they're definitely on the rise.
Yeah, watching this West Virginia Baylor game was a lot of fun for me. I love watching Clint Trickett. It reminds me, I'll always think back to his first game against Oklahoma in the primetime freshman year. And his dad actually was sick on Saturday. Wasn't even at the Florida State Notre Dame game. So Clint balled out for his dad on Saturday. One play that really swung the tide for me. It was going into the half. I was able to watch this game, and going into the half, there's about 50 seconds left, and West Virginia ran a little screen pass. And at first, officials had called an eligible receiver downfield, and there was like a 20-yard gain on the play. And then they went back and reviewed the play against the rules. You're not allowed to review that play, which has some Baylor fans angry. And they determined that the receiver was behind the line of scrimmage when he caught the ball, therefore making the ineligible man downfield eligible. And so they gave him the 20-yard gain. West Virginia's kicker, who can give Roberto Aguayo a run for his money, is his best kicker in the nation, sunk a 54-yarder a week before he hit the 55-yarder against Texas Tech to win that game. And then it just kind of seemed like West Virginia really believed in themselves coming out of the half. Like, we can really do this. Like, we're giving it to them. West Virginia turned the ball over 3 times in the first quarter, and they were still right there in the game. And then you got to talk about the penalties. 18 penalties for Baylor for over 200 yards. And it just seemed like Kevin White if he didn't catch the ball, he was catching a flag because the refs were loving him. And to his defense, he was drawing a lot of those fouls. The refs did get a little foul happy. There was a lot of tension in that game, and it seemed like they were trying to slow that down, but they just kind of built the animosity between the two teams because you could see frustration mounting. One thing that really swung the tide in West Virginia's direction, though, was their ability to stop Baylor's run game. Baylor's always predicated themselves on being able to run the ball and stay balanced, and that's how they've averaged over 600 yards of offense leading up to this game. 322 yards this week, almost half their season average, and that was because they keyed on the run, and then they were able to just shut down Bryce Petty when they needed to make plays, and they did. They got pressure, they got after him, and you could tell Bryce Petty was flustered, and West Virginia came out with a huge win.
West Virginia, they lost 3 turnovers to Baylor's 0, and they still lost by 14 at home against the 4th-ranked team in the nation. That's quite an impressive feat to accomplish. Yeah, I mean, you guys covered it, man. Petty did not look sharp at all. Trickhead's balling out. He's very slight, but the kid can sling it. He's got a cannon. Next week, they're actually a 1-point dog against Oklahoma State, at Oklahoma State, and that's kind of surprising because they're on the other ends of the scores this past week, of their games this past week. So yeah, that'll be an interesting game to look at. Both of these teams seem right on the verge of doing something special, but Oklahoma's kind of looking like they're going downhill. West Virginia's coming up, so it'll be exciting to watch.
All right, staying in the Big 12, we got Kansas State take on Oklahoma. This was a very close game. Final score 31-30. I actually predicted Kansas State winning. However, from what I saw of the game, it looked to me more like Oklahoma lost it rather than Kansas State won. I mean, give credit to Bill Snyder and his group for being in position to capitalize on that. But really, Oklahoma outgained Kansas State. They did have 2 turnovers compared to Kansas State having 0. But they controlled the clock as well. They had better third down conversion. I mean, I wasn't able to watch the entire thing, unfortunately, but to me, it kind of looked like it just came down to the kicker. I know the missed PAT was blocked, but they need to get that kick up, or he just needs to put that field goal in from 19 yards out. That's, at this level, you got to be able to make that. It's kind of unfortunate. But I think that this could be big for Kansas State because now you look at what they've been able to do. Their loss was to Auburn. It was 6 points, a game they probably should have had. They beat Oklahoma here, who was, at least before this week, still a possible contender. They have games against other ranked Big 12 opponents. If they're able to take care of business the rest of the season, they're definitely right in the playoff picture.
This game was a lot of fun to watch. Jake Waters, I gain a lot of respect for him this weekend. He busted a big 56-yard run first play of the second half and lands awkwardly on his right shoulder, and he stays in the game, and you can tell he's wincing in pain, and they end up getting a field goal on the drive, and the injury seemed like it really affected that drive. He couldn't really throw. It seemed like he was tentative. He came off the sideline. It looked like he might not even come back in the game at that point, but he was able to stay in the game and just battle. It reminded me a little bit of Colin Klein in the sense of just how he just went out and competed, was able to run, was able to throw, and just do a lot of things that Colin Klein did a couple years ago when Kansas State beat Oklahoma in Norman. But, I mean, the story of the game was kicking, and it was kind of shades of Kyle Brotzman, if you recall the Boise State kicker against Nevada a couple years ago. What made it even more humorous was Oklahoma's kicker had just become the all-time leader in the Big 12 history for field goals. And for that to happen, and Kyle Brotzman had the same thing. He was NCAA's all-time point leader, and then he botches a couple field goals down the stretch. They lose the game. Same story here. If Oklahoma hits field goals, we're still talking about their playoff hopes. We're still talking about them alive and well in the Big 12. But their Big 12 hopes and their playoff hopes are virtually down the drain. And all I have to say to Bob Stoops is, go get yourself an Aguayo.
It was It's kind of a strange game. Oklahoma outgained Kansas State 533 to 385 total yards. Trevor Knight had a relatively very good game, and like I believe Blake said last episode, Trevor Knight's not has been a big name, but he's thrown 6 touchdowns and 5 interceptions up until this game. He went 26-32, 318, 3 touchdowns and 1 pick. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty good, but at the end of the day, Gronk.
Oh yeah.
Good. Yeah, definitely fun to see the other Gronkowski brother getting some love.
Yeah, like the 7th one or whatever.
Yeah. All right.
And one thing I will say about Trevor Knight is he had a good game, but outside of Sterling Shepard, it seems like the Oklahoma receivers and him aren't on the same page. They're dropping balls. It's like it's either Sterling Shepard or bust for him. And Oklahoma, I mean, they can fix the problem this season, but it's not really going to help them in terms of titles, whether in the league or around the nation. And it's unfortunate that Shepard went out for a short period during the game because it affected the Oklahoma offense.
Yeah, they kind of remind me of the Detroit Lions, where they kind of got the gunslinger quarterback and the star receiver, and they have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. Just haven't really been able to put it all together.
Mm-hmm.
Kansas State is a 10-point favorite at home against Texas next week, so they're looking pretty sharp. Their lone loss to Auburn, so we'll see what they can do out there in the Big 12.
All right, and another Texas team played that we're going to talk about. It was Texas A&M and Bama last week.
Wait, Texas A&M played?
Literally roll tide, man.
Yeah, it was
an uphill battle.
Uh,
All right.
So last week I talked about how these were two teams that were kind of trending downward, and I thought that this game would give us some answers on how these teams were going to be for the rest of the season. I think we definitely know who Texas A&M is. They look to still be a year or two away from really being able to compete in the West. Kenny Hill had talent. I overhyped after the first week. I think that eventually he'll be able to be a good player, but I think this week kind of showed where he is right now. Alabama was just, they throttled Texas A&M right from the start. They were able to do what they want through the air, on the ground. Maury Cooper didn't quite get 250 like Alex predicted, but he still had a great game. I think that Alabama is definitely going in the right direction. It's hard to say anything else after a 59-0 win. I still like to see what they could do against someone better. I think, like we talked about last week, a shutout win is impressive no matter what, but I don't think that Texas A&M was really a top 25 team. So we'll see what Bama can do. I think we got more answers about Texas A&M than we did Alabama. Yeah, we'll see how that plays out in the West.
Yeah, I think you're right on with your assessment of A&M. We saw the real A&M. I mean, unfortunately for them, they're a young team, and they had to go at Ole Miss, or they went at Mississippi State, and then at home against Ole Miss, and then at Alabama. Just a brutal 3-game stretch for them. And it kind of seemed like they mailed it in. Once they got down a little bit, it was ugly. Outgained by 397 yards in the first half. They had 8 first downs in the whole game to Alabama's 30. Alabama averaged 9 yards a play. It was like Alabama was playing Georgia Southern. And it was crazy. That's Alabama's largest margin of victory in 35 years. And that's counting all the Georgia Southern games that Alabama's played in the last 35 years, which is crazy because Alabama's been so dominant over almost the last, 8 or 9 years. To have that be the biggest win in 35 years, be against the Texas A&M team is saying something. It was the first time in Kevin Sumlin's career that he's been shut out, and I think A&M's got a lot of growing pains to go through, like you said, Blake. Alabama, on the other hand, it was impressive to see how they responded to the adversity that they had kind of gone through with the Arkansas game being close and the loss to Ole Miss 2 weeks ago. But I still feel like we don't know a lot about them. They don't really have a defining win on the season, so we're going to have to kind of do the wait and see approach with Bama.
And a goose egg, that's impressive. Anytime you get that from a Power Five conference, anytime you shut out a Power Five conference school, that's very impressive. And Alabama, I think, is entering a lot of people's Final Fours right now, and rightfully so. They still got Saban. They still got a great run game. They still got a stout defense. Um, Real quick, before we move on to our Final Fours, I'd like to mention and kind of shout out ASU for beating Stanford. Um, that's just something Oregon hasn't done in the past 2 years, and uh, that's a nice win for them. Kevin Hogan just sometimes seems like he hasn't shown up in a lot of games. It's important to note that Devin Kajust was out for that game, and tight ends have just seemed to be torching the Ducks. I can talk about the Ducks all day. Do you guys want to get to our Final Fours and our first four out?
Let's talk players of the week really quickly before.
Yeah.
I'll start. This is a game that I think we all predicted this team would win. I don't know if anybody or if any of us thought it would be this close, but we talked about how this particular player was sort of on the rise, and I picked JT Barrett for my player of the week. It's definitely tough. Cody Kessler had an outstanding game. Multiple running backs had great games. I liked what he was able to do. He was 19 of 31, 261 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and he was also able to run for over 100 yards, add a couple of scores there. For me, why I picked him, though, was because I think that when their performance, also with what else happened over the weekend, has put Ohio State kind of back into the playoff mix. With the Big 12 kind of looking down, maybe the Big 10 will be able to put a team in the playoffs. And Ohio State might be able to be that team if they can beat Michigan State and win the Big 10. JT Barrett is definitely a name to remember for the rest of the season.
I had a little fun with my players of the week. I'm going players of the week. It's teammates, and they were a nice tandem this week. They proved me wrong. I called the wild, wild Big 12 West upset weekend, and Oklahoma State failed to make that a success for me. And so I got to tip my cap to Trevon Boykin and Josh Doxson. Josh Doxson, Big 12 Player of the Week, 8 catches, 225 yards, 2 touchdowns, plus a 77-yarder on Oklahoma State for a touchdown. Then literally 3 offensive plays later when TCU has the ball, he says, 77 tastes good, I'm going to hit you with 84. And it was blown coverage all the way, but it was impressive nonetheless. And Trevon Boykin, just another outstanding performance, 414 yards, 3 touchdowns, 26 for 39. Just commanding. I really had some respect for Oklahoma State's defense after how they played against Jameis Winston. I thought they had some resiliency in that Week 1 game, and they looked pretty solid throughout the season leading up to this game. But they got torched in Big 12 fashion.
I didn't know who Kevin White really was until a couple weeks ago. He's my breakout player. This guy was balling out, 8 grabs, 132 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a lot of fantasy points. I wish it was college fantasy football, but I mean that's impressive. I just want to make that real quick. And now I'd like to thank the officiating in the Florida State Notre Dame game. A lot of officials just hold their whistle, hold their flags when it's late in the game. They change the game, the way the game is called, and it's nice to see an official make a big call in a big spot because I know I've been screwed in situations late in games, and I'd just like to see the right calls being made, and for the whole game.
And just on top of your player of the week, Mikey, I'd like to give a shout out to TCU Kevin White with his 6th career interception this weekend. I'm moving him up the ranks of the all-time interception leaders at TCU. So shout out to both Kevin Whites.
All right. So moving on, we have, as of this week, our first 4 and our next 4. For me, my first four, I have number one, Mississippi State had the week off. I don't think anybody else really stood out to me. Nobody showed me that they were better than Mississippi State, at least so far. Number two, I have Florida State. I was actually surprised. I was watching a lot of analysis, a lot of reaction shows, and I saw multiple people say that they would leave FSU out of the top four. I have no idea why. Maybe they haven't been able to put a complete game together yet, but they've still been able to find wins even without playing well. I think that's impressive. Uh, Pulling out a win against a top five team, no matter what the situation is that's always something to be impressed by. I think that FSU is definitely one of the best teams in the country. Number three, I have Ole Miss. FSU and Ole Miss, they're almost right there next to each other, tied. I give the slight edge to Jameis Winston because I think that Florida State will play better, and I think that Bo Wallace is not quite on the same level as Winston. Number four is really tough because I can make a case for basically 4 through 8 as all being able to be in that last spot, but I have Auburn in there right now. I know Alabama had a big win. A lot of people are putting them back in. I just don't put too much stock into beating Texas A&M. I like what Auburn has been able to do. I think they have a little bit more quality wins, and their loss, they lost to the number one team in the country. I definitely think Mississippi State is better than Ole Miss, so when you compare losses, I think Auburn has a better loss than Alabama, whatever that ends up meaning. So for my next four, it starts off with Alabama. Number 6, I have Oregon. They were pretty close. As of right now, I would have to keep them out of the top four, but I think as the season goes along, I could definitely move them in. I think that as they get healthier, they are definitely one of the best teams. To me, if they are able to get healthier and keep doing what they've been doing, remember they were leading against UCLA like 42-10, and they beat Washington 49-20, so they not only won, but won by large margins. And if that continues, their loss to Arizona, at least in my eyes, sort of becomes an asterisk, almost like it doesn't count. They would be undefeated with a little asterisk. After that, I have UGA. I definitely think that they are in the picture. I think that you have to consider them a contender. The East is fortunately an easy route, and if they get to the championship and they knock off whoever the West champion is, I imagine that team will be number one in the country. You'll definitely have to look at that win and think that Georgia is a playoff contender for real. Number 8, I have Notre Dame. They had a close loss. I'm sure all the people back in South Bend, Indiana, think that the refs lost that game for Notre Dame. I think that they look good. Didn't quite answer everything. I think they look a little bit better, but a loss is still a loss, and that's why they're as far back as number 8.
All right. Number 1, SEC fans, come at me. I got Florida State at number 1 still. I swear if Florida State was an SEC team, they would still be number 1 in the eyes of the media with their same schedule. I recall a certain Auburn team last year winning a bunch of close games, and the four-letter network called them a team of destiny. Fast forward a year later, and Florida State is just a lucky team who seems to win down the stretch. I think they're battle-tested, and I think you can't become number 1 until you take the throne from number 1, and right now that's still Florida State. Mississippi State, got to give them number 2. They've been really impressive in their wins, not only winning, but winning handily. Their LSU win, not as impressive. Texas A&M win, not as impressive in my eyes as to some. But just total dominance. Dak Prescott's been great. So as long as they keep winning, they'll be right there. And if they run the table, I got to give them number 1 spot over Florida State. At 3, I got Ole Miss. Beating Bama looked even better this week after Bama recovered against A&M. But like you said, not too much stock in blowing out A&M. Number 4, I'm going to surprise some people. I'm taking Oregon. Oregon beat a great Michigan State team, and not only that, they pulled away handily at the end of the game. To me, the loss against Arizona is an outlier. The offensive line was decimated. You've seen since Jake Fisher's come back, it's been a different team. And my belief is Oregon has the best player in the country. And when you have the best player in the country surrounded by talent, I think you got to be right up there. So I got Oregon at number 4. At number 5, I got the Golden Domers Notre Dame. They impressed me a lot on Saturday night, and you take the spread. I mean, a 4-point margin of victory for Florida State, and you give 3 points for home field advantage, and that's a real impressive performance by Notre Dame. To really, if they run that play right, if they just don't mess it up, that's all they have to do. Don't mess it up. They beat Florida State, and they're right up there. We're talking number 2 or 3 in the country. Number 6, I got Auburn. The Mississippi State loss looks okay. There was a lot of turnovers. It was kind of a sloppy game, but that Kansas State loss looks a lot better. Or that Kansas State win, looks a lot better this week too after Kansas State knocked off Oklahoma. But Auburn's got a long ways to go. They got a lot of tough teams still ahead on the slate. 7, I have Bama. I know Bama fans probably hating on me for taking Bama 7, but they still haven't beaten anyone to really impress me. The A&M win was big, but we'll see. 8, I wanted to go with UGA, but South Carolina I can't pick over Michigan State. Michigan State's loss to Oregon is a little better in my eyes, or a lot better in my eyes. Let's not lie here. Michigan State's got a dominant defense. They went to the Rose Bowl last year. Mark D'Antonio's got that program just on the up and up, and Connor Cook's playing real well. So I got Michigan State right there. But to me, there's about 10 teams that are all about the same talent level. There's not a clear-cut number 1. And there's not a lot separating all those teams. So I think we're still going to see a lot of movement these last couple weeks of the season.
To start off, my first 4, I've got Oregon number 1. Okay, I got to base this off of this year alone. Not looking at last year. If I did, I'd put Florida State number 1. I got Florida State number 2 right behind Mississippi State. I just like the story. I like what's going on there a lot. And I hope they can come out of the SEC East, hopefully face a really good Georgia team. And I think those 2 teams will battle it out to see who makes it to the big dance, or the little dance, I guess. Number 2, Florida State. Great win. That was a great atmosphere in Tallahassee. 3rd, Ole Miss. Yeah, they're looking good, undefeated. And 4th, like you guys said, a lot of these teams are really close. But I got to go with Auburn over Alabama. Alabama 14-13. I know Saban's complaining to the fans that, hey, a win is a win. You guys can't expect us to dominate every weekend. But that 14-13 against Arkansas. That doesn't look too good after the way Georgia handled them, down some players. 5th, though, I put Alabama because there's no denying the goose egg right there, and I don't want to look like a homer, and put Oregon ahead of them. So yeah, Oregon at 6. They need to get healthy. The Arizona State loss. Yeah, Arizona losing to them last year. One time it might be lucky. Second time, okay, they got our number. That's a problem. I know we were injured. Excuses all across the board. Ducks didn't come out to play last week because they didn't care now that they were out of national championship contention. But Oregon healthy, I think, is the best team in the country right now. I just don't like the way their offensive line is right now. Even with getting Jake Fisher back, I think Alabama beats them neutral site head-to-head in this day. 7th, I got the Dogs from the Peach State. That is the Peach State. Georgia. Yeah, looked really good against Arkansas this week, dominating. And then number 8, I got Notre Dame. I think they surprised a lot of people. I said they might get crab walked on, but that wasn't the case. They're in it till the end right there. And honestly, that was just so obvious. I don't understand why players just do stuff you're not allowed to do. And that was just it seemed pretty blatant to me on that second to last play of the game on the offensive pass interference. Um, so predictions, we got Mississippi State winning the SEC. SEC champion, SEC champion right now, I believe, is the only automatic slot in the playoff out of all the champions. We might see a Big 12, Pac-12, or Big 10 ACC championship if they're not undefeated. Uh, they have no guarantee of getting in, but I think no matter what, the SEC champ will get in. And I'm picking Mississippi State right now. Second, Florida State. I think they're going to win out. Um, that Florida game isn't as tough as it was in a few years past. Third, I got Oregon. Let's beat Cal here. But we're all looking ahead to Stanford because we got some revenge cooking right there. And fourth, I think this might surprise some people, but I think the SEC, a second team might not work out because of they might cannibalism, but I think TCU might slide in to that fourth spot, and that's what I have right now. That was a nice win against Oklahoma State, and I'd like to see them hang on against Baylor there, and they'd be high on everyone's list if they did. But it's impressive that they had a nice lead in that game.
All right, I'm with you for most of your prediction. Number one, I have Mississippi State. I see them winning out. I pretty much was just looking at the Egg Bowl. Ole Miss is at home, but Ole Miss also has a few tough games before that. So if they slip up, I just think that Mississippi State is the better team. I think Ole Miss has a harder time winning out. Number two, I have Florida State. They're going to run the table. I think right now, me and Alex Humble are just hoping that Will Muschamp keeps his job just so we can mark our calendar with a W each year.
Oh, yeah.
Number three, I have Oregon. I see them running the table. They've been impressive the last couple weeks, either giving large margins of victory or having them at some point during the game. Number four, I'm with you. I also went Big 12. However, I went Kansas State. I think that I was kind of trying to decide between Kansas State and Michigan State. And to me, Michigan State, at best, when you look at what kind of wins and losses they have, they'll be 1-1 in terms of impressive games, and that'll be Oregon and Ohio State. I think Kansas State, they'll be. I think I had them at 4-1 when it comes to that. They have games. They're at TCU, at West Virginia, and they're at Baylor. And if they're able to win all those road games, I think you're not going to be able to deny them when it comes to the playoffs.
For mine, I got no surprises with my number one, Florida State. But watch out. I'm cautiously optimistic about their Thursday night football game against Louisville, not this week, but the upcoming week. Thursday night football is a different beast than Saturday college football. It's unpredictable. Florida State lost to Wake Forest on Thursday night football a couple years back, and that was a talented Florida State team. Number two, I got Alabama at number two. I don't like Alabama that much. I'm an anti-Alabama guy, and I'm outspoken against them. But I just can't deny the Alabama, the talent that they have on that roster, and Nick Saban. And I think the Mississippi schools, I think one of them's going to get in. You'll find out in a second. At number three, I have Oregon. I think Oregon's going to run the table. I think they're going to get in. And then I think that at number four, Mississippi State will get in. I think they're going to trip up once. But I think one of them or Bama is going to win the SEC West. And I think the way things are shaping up, the SEC is going to get two teams into the playoff. They have 5 teams in the top 7 right now. I mean, it's a love affair between ESEC, PN, and the SEC. So I just don't see there being any way that the SEC doesn't get 2 teams in at this point unless they all implode and they all hire Will Muschamp and Al Golden to coach them. So we'll see about that. Then my dark horse, I still see Michigan State being right there at the end of the season. I think if they take care of business against Ohio State, they're going to be able to run the table at least in the Big 12 play, and then get into the conference championship game. Probably play a team like Nebraska again if they can win that game. It's going to be hard to deny a one-loss Michigan State with that one loss being at Oregon, but we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, that was my scenario. I was looking at Kansas State, Michigan State, and whatever one-loss SEC West team, Ole Miss or Alabama. I think that would be really tough for the committee to try and decide between those three. Definitely be interesting to see how the season plays out. That's just our prediction for the end of the year, what we think will happen based on what we see now. And real quick, before we end the show, one of our fans of the show had a special request. They wanted to talk about the San Jose State Spartans.
My dad's alma mater. Let's go.
Not sure they're quite playoff contenders. I had them a little bit far down on my list when I was picking first four, next four. However, they did have an impressive 27-20 overtime win last week. So Jacob Iverson, we'll see how they finish out, see what they can do in the bowl season.
Hey, I got another quick shout out to the AP poll for ranking Oregon ahead of Michigan State. I just don't get why they messed around and did that, putting Oregon behind them. But whatever.
And my final shout out of the week goes to the polls as well. Florida State lost some first place votes this week to Mississippi State. Just goes to show if you're in the SEC, beating the bye week is more impressive than beating any other team. So go SEC.
All right, check us out. We'll have another episode sometime this week where we'll have our predictions for Week 9. If any news comes up, and Alex and I are watching Gurley and Winston closely, we will make a video and let you know what's going on there. But that's it for this one. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned.
All right, go Ducks.